The Denver Gazette is counting down the top 10 sports stories of the last year. And today we have reached number 4. And number 4 is not a great one. It may make people a little sad, but it is the Colorado Avalanche being unable to defend their Stanley Cup by flaming out in the first round of the playoffs against the Seattle Kraken. So Kyle Fredrickson is here with me to kind of talk about the Avs in 2023. Kyle, can you believe we're at the end of the year? I don't know where 2023 went.
Yeah, it is hard to believe that it's gone by so quickly. And also my first, full year with the Gazette. So, thankful for that and the chance to cover a team. And yeah, so, last year didn't end so great, but man, it was certainly exciting and chock full of storylines. And this was a team that had people believing for a while that they could really repeat. And, just to have that belief and to have a team to be in that conversation, I think in retrospect, I mean, Avs fans should be thankful that they're rooting for a franchise that is in that position every year.
Yeah, you and I talked throughout last season, or the last. It's hard. The season started in 2022, I guess. If you want to, yeah,
Yeah,
it
right.
overlaps in the NHL and the NBA, but about how we weren't sure exactly how they were doing it. They were just kind of kept climbing the standings, and then they ended up finishing first in the Central. They were injured all year, and I feel like every time we got on a podcast, we talked about injuries.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And it was high expectations going in based on a couple of factors. I mean, I remember one of the first things I covered for the Gazette when I joined the Avs beat was Nathan MacKinnon signing his contract
Yes.
extension, right? And that was key, humongous piece of this team's future. Not like it was a surprise, but to get that length of term where, Nate should be playing with the Avalanche into his early 30s, that was huge. Back then, there was an expectation that yes, Gabe Landeskog was injured, but he's going to be back for the start of the year. We think that, he's on track to do that. And while Nate fulfilled his duties and was a guy that, led this team in so many ways at 100-point year, the absence of Landeskog really kind of scarred the season and really limited the potential of what should have been a really good chance to repeat. Even without Landeskog, like I mentioned, this team won the Central Division. They finished the last 20 games of the year 16-3-1. They were just playing their best hockey at the right time. And even with all the stuff with the injuries and the lineup being up and down with guys in and out, so many issues throughout the year, it felt like there was a real chance for them to do something special and make a run. But it was just so hard. I think once they got to the playoffs, they kind of just hit a wall.
They really did. And this team was different than the Stanley Cup team. New goalie in Alexander Gorgiev. Nazem Kadri was gone. There was a lot of changes, even before the season started. So it was a
Right.
different Avs team. But they draw Seattle in the first round, and people are like, okay, there's this, young team, never been there before, playing the mighty Avalanche. Everything's going to go the Avs way.
Yeah, not so much. I even looked back at our predictions. We all picked the Avs to advance, and
In
that's not
five,
shocking. I think you might have had them in 5. I had them in 7. To be fair, I did think that it'd be a grind them out series, and even going into that game 7 at home, it felt like that was a game that the Avs would win. I mean, in game 6, Eric Johnson scored the game winner, and he's all smiles to force that game 7 coming back home. The battle tested Avs get a Kraken team without a whole lot of star power. You really just thought that they'd take care of business, but they lose that game 7 2-1, and it's over. And yeah, give credit to the Kraken. They had so much depth and not a lot of stars, but they were just able to exploit the Avs' biggest weakness, and that was their lack of scoring behind their top line. And it's an issue that we'll talk about this year as well as we follow the Avalanche. But a year ago, even more so, they weren't really able to get enough out of guys like Alex Newhook, who's now gone, to the Canadians. Some of the other depth players that are now gone, Matt Nieto, didn't provide much scoring. When the Avs thought that he might be a late piece to help them win some of these games. So yeah, it's just we saw a lot of roster turnover from that series. But also it was a great environment. I will say, is just from a reporter standpoint, love going to Climate Pledge Arena to see that fan base a city that loved the Sonics so much for so long, to be back in that old building that they renovated, to see them have playoff success. I mean, it was nutty. So we'll see if the Kraken can sustain that success into this year. I think the Avalanche have proven that they're a championship contender again. We'll see, that the Kraken have to prove that as well. But I mean, what do you remember about that series?
So, I've been looking back at the series a little bit, and I remember that Grubauer came in here and stole game one from the
That's
Avs.
right. Yeah,
They,
that was big, and that was a
yeah,
shock, I think, to a lot of
yeah. I
folks.
mean, Grubauer, who I guess was I don't even know how many goalies ago with the Avs. I guess Kemper was after him for the cup run, and now they're on Gorgiev. Is that right, or was there somebody in between Kemper and Grubauer? I don't think so.
No, 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 that's
No,
right.
okay. So yeah, I mean, he makes 34 saves in game one, and I remember just thinking, oh boy, home ice is gone. This is trouble. They're gonna, and like you talked about, the atmosphere in Seattle was going to be insane. Seattle loves their sports, had sports taken away from them and the Sonics. And I mean, they were ready up there. But then the Avs come back and bounce back in game two. And I'm like, okay, it's still only a 1-goal game, but that's playoff hockey, whatever. Okay, everything's fine. Then they score 6 goals in Seattle. The Avs do, and it's 2-1. And I know as a fan, I was feeling pretty good at that moment.
Right, right. And then, of course,
They lose
we'd
an
be
OT in
remiss.
game 4.
Right, right. And we'd
Yeah.
be remiss not to talk about Val Nichushkin, right? And that
Yes.
whole
Yeah.
situation. We don't want to harp on it. I don't want to make it sound like that's the story of the season. But in a lot of ways, after that happened and the Avs knew they were going to be without him for the rest of the series, something was just a little bit off about this team, right? And so I think Cale Makar has probably been the only guy thinking back who's really owned up to that it's kind of hard to get your focus back on winning games when one of your very best players leaves under such, I guess from our perspective, very strange circumstances. So let's say Val doesn't get into that trouble and he stays with the team. I really do think that the Avs maybe go around further. But this was never a roster that was built, I think, to actually win a championship. And they fooled us a little bit in the way that they played so well at the end of the regular season to win the Central that they could actually go out and do it. But it just kind of feels like an anomaly in retrospect of a team that gets really hot and then gets really cold, right? It's a streaky team. If you're going to have, one knock on them in this Jared Bednar era, I'm sure you could look at a lot of teams throughout the league and they go through similar issues. But sustaining that winning and also avoiding those big losing stretches is tough. And this was a team that once Val went out in the playoffs, I'm just not sure they had it in them.
And the amazing thing is they lost 3 home games in this series. Yeah, so
Right.
because they win game 3 in Seattle, and then lose game 4 in Seattle, and then lose game 5 back here in Denver. Go get the win in game 6, and then Grubauer again stones them in game 7.
Yeah,
34 or 33 saves again. And it just, like you said, the roster was never ready. And it just proves how hard it is, especially in the NHL, to defend the Stanley Cup. I mean, I don't know how the Lightning did it those years.
for sure. And I do want to bring up how great Mikko Rantanen was all
Yeah.
year, right?
Yeah.
And the way that he elevated his game. I was there when he scored his 50th goal of the season. A huge milestone for him to prove that he's one of those elite players in the league. He's going through a bit of a slump right now. He's not scoring at the rate that we expect from him over the past couple weeks for the Avs. But certainly, through all of last season, the way that he stayed healthy when other guys couldn't, the way that he showed leadership in that locker room, talking after tough losses, really kind of stepped up in a way that validated his place, on this team. Because when everyone's healthy, he's one of those guys where when his play is at an elite level, they're such a hard team to beat.
Yeah. And I think Miko was the one guy who didn't miss extended time during the year. Am I right in that?
Right, exactly right. And it was so tough. I mean, I don't have the number of games lost, but it was just insane what the Avs went through a year ago.
Yeah. And now, of course, into this season, which has started in, October of 23, there's a little bit of motivation with this team. We have talked about, but like you mentioned, they're streaky this year too.
Yeah, they are, but they're built for success, right? And I
Yeah,
think on paper, they sure looked like a better team this year, just because of the size and the physicality. It seemed like they got kind of meaner with some of their additions. And we've seen that with the way that Miles Wood and Ross Colton plays. the jury's still out on Ryan Johansson and whether or not he's the fit long term at second line center. But he's still been a good locker room fit for this team. So it's a long season to play out. The Avs are first in the Central right now. Yes, they're on a bit of a downturn, as you mentioned, being a streaky team. But I would have full expectations of them being in contention to win the division this year and certainly making it back to the postseason. Because if anything, Georgiev proved himself to be, starter quality a year ago. It's been a little bit inconsistent at times this year, but I still do think that he's proven that the Avs were smart and getting them on the contract that they have him. I mean, he's a steal for the sort of production that they're getting. So bright days ahead, but 2023 in a nutshell, you brought it up in the intro here, but so hard to repeat. That's why you got to give so much respect to the Lightning for what they did. And even to get back for that third
Yep.
time, just really impressive.
Yeah, and I think the story of the 2023 year for the Avs is just injuries. I think that
Yeah.
you could just call it injuries. I can't remember when was it announced that Gabe would be gone again this year. I can't remember when that was in the summer, right? After the
Yeah,
playoffs? Yeah.
And that's what's nice about this year. We all know Gabe Landeskog isn't playing this season. And we sort of forget last year it was sort of dangled as when Gabe gets back, when Gabe gets back. And that's tough. And for Landeskog to be the captain of this team, and for the possibility to be out there that he might not play again, that's very significant. And that guessing game over the past year was no fun for the Avalanche. It certainly wasn't fun for their fans, but at least heading into this new year, there's a little bit more clarity. Jared Bednar has been asked multiple times over this past week if there's been an update, because it's been about 6 months since surgery, and Gabe is supposed to come into town to be evaluated. I'm sure the team at some point will give us an update, but it seems like they're being pretty coy, kind of giving Gabe his privacy at this point in the process. But everyone's kind of waiting to see how he's doing, given just how much weight he carries in that dressing room.
Kyle, thanks for coming on and kind of reliving some 2023 memories with me for the Colorado Avalanche. Look for all of these we'll have videos on YouTube. We'll have content on denvergazette.com. And at the end of the year, there will be a big year in review podcast that we release on our podcast feed. So make sure to check out all of our content looking back at 2023. And Kyle, we will catch up again soon. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.